data, because all of this always starts with the data. Remember, the data is the most important part of machine learning, not the model. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what are some of the best APIs for detailed and professional sports statistics and data, especially for uses like fantasy sports leagues and sports analytics? Now, we're not going to do, fantasy sports, but we're going to still, the same principles apply, game data, stuff like that. So it's going to give us a list of APIs, ESPN, Sports Radar, and we're going to pick one from random. We're going to pick Sports Data IO because this is the one that I've been building with, Sports Data IO. So if we go to Sports Data IO, we can see that this is a developer portal and they allow you to sign up for free. You can get a free trial and you don't have to pay anything under the free trial. It's free to use forever. That's exactly what we want to see. We're going to sign up as a new user. And once we sign up, we're going to pick a sport. I'll say the NBA. And then it's going to give us a list of API documentation. And we can see all the different sports here under documentation, NFL, MLB, NBA. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the game data and we're going to try to predict the winning team given just the game data. None of the pregame data. We'll add that in later, the season data, the player data. No, none of that. We're just going to start off with a super basic model that takes in matches, Atlanta versus, Salt Lake City. And then it just predicts the winning team based on just that. And we'll keep improving it. All right. So which of these endpoints, that's what we call these different data streams that an API give us, which of these endpoints should we use for this model? And the best endpoint we should use for this model is going to be the game data endpoint. So games by date. We'll search for that endpoint, games by date, and we see it right here, games by date. And it's got our API key in there. And if we go to this link that it gives us, it will start pulling all of the games for this given date. We just have to give it a date. So what we want to do is we want to pull the past 30 days of historical data, then train a model on it to predict the winning team given a matchup that we give it. And you can see under this JSON file that it returns in the web that it's just going to give us for a single date the games that were played. But we want it for the next 30 days. So we're going to ask ChatGPT to do that for us, to write the Python script, to take this endpoint and give it to us in Python. So we'll go back to ChatGPT and we're going to say, here is a description of the Sports Data IO API endpoint for games by date. Now we're going to paste that in right into ChatGPT, and I want you to get really used to pasting in stuff like this right into ChatGPT because the context window just keeps getting bigger. So just go back to ChatGPT. We're going to paste it into quotes, and we're going to say, here is that endpoint. Please write a Python script that uses this to pull the last 30 days of data and saves it as a CSV file that I can run in a Google Colab notebook. And then it's going to give us that Python script that we can run in a Google Colab notebook, which anybody can use for free. So we'll go back to Colab and we'll paste in what it gives us. And once we paste in what it gives us, we're going to try it out. And this NBA games last year CSV file has got a lot of data, but it doesn't have pre-game data. So we're going to add that later. But before we do that, we're going to ask ChatGPT what type of machine learning model we should use to make a prediction. So we'll ask it, what type of machine learning model should we use to predict the winning team given this data set? And it's going to give us a list, but I can, spoiler alert, tell you which model it's going to tell us. It's going to be logistic regression. And the reason we want logistic regression is because logistic regression gives us A, a binary outcome, either a win or a loss or a draw. And it gives us B, a percentage likelihood of that outcome, like 70% the Cavs are going to win, which is what we want. What this does is it applies a formula called the logistic regression function to a linear combination of inputs. These are called coefficients, and these coefficients are numbers that are learned through an optimization process. That could be stochastic gradient descent, SGD, it's a big word, but it's how deep learning works. It could be through some other optimization technique like maximum likelihood estimation. It could be through some other optimization technique like Newton's method. But the best part is we don't have to decide what that optimization technique should be. We're going to use a library that does that for us. And which library are we going to use? Recall from the beginning of the video, I said scikit-learn. So let's go back and we're going to say, okay, please create a logistic regression model to predict the winning team using this data set. So what it's going to do is it's going to pre-process that data set so that it's in a format that it can predict the target variable. And the target variable is going to be either the home team or the away team. And this is a lot of the data science process is deciding, in fact, most of it actually, it's deciding which of these columns, which of these rows are necessary, which aren't. And this was a long, tedious process for data scientists before ChatGPT. But now that ChatGPT is here, we don't have to do that as much. We can just have it do it for us. So it's going to give us that code, and we're going to go back and we're going to paste that code in. Now, that's not enough, right? Like that's a simple regression model, and it's going to predict the winning team. And we can see it predicting the winning team here, but it's not good. It needs pre-game data. What were the penalties? What were the injuries? What were the winning streaks? All these things. There could be dozens of different features that we could add to this initial CSV data set, and we will using the Sports Data API. So let's go back to the Sports Data API. We can see that there's much more data that's available for us, right? So we'll go to Sports Data, we'll go to league feeds, we'll go to teams, we'll go to all teams, and we're just going to get some team data. Like given all these teams in the NBA, look at all this other data that is for all these different teams. We're going to want to use a lot of that team data. So we're going to go back to ChatGPT, like always. We always go back to ChatGPT, and we say, that worked. Now I'd like to modify the original CSV to contain pregame data so that the winning team predictions will be more accurate. Please write me a Python script that takes player season stats endpoint described here. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to paste the season stats endpoint described here back into ChatGPT. And that output I'm going to also paste with this output. I'll go back here, get the output, and paste it in here, and saves it to a CSV, then merges it with my existing CSV, and lastly trains a logistic regression model on that to predict the winning team. And once we have that data set, it's going to look like this. And here's the combined dataset.csv. It's got quarters. It's got 44 different features here. It's got assists percentage, steal percentages, all these different things combined in aggregate across different players. And once we have that, it's going to be able to predict the winning team, as you can see here, given that data. And we can now continually add data in this way. For player stats, individual player stats, we can find the average of all the steals, all the wins, things like that. We can add in betting data feeds, fantasy data, news feeds. There's so much we can add, but we're just going to stick with historical data for this model. And that's it for our historical data predictor. Now, I want to move us to our next model in our 3-model mixture of experts.